Everything we know, from people and ants to stars and galaxies to quarks and atoms, the entire universe, might just be a simulation running inside a supercomputer inside an even bigger universe. Ancient philosophers said that the universe is a dream that we're waiting to wake up from. In this dream world of the imagination, anything is possible. All cultural items, from the dreams of our rodent-like ancestors, to books, to television shows, are merely permutations of the reality we think we live in. Today's age of computers and video games places simulations at the center of our cultural consciousness. A select group of us perform simulations for fun and profit, and we call them games, role-playing and otherwise. We live to run simulations. Join us on the Simulationist podcast as we explore our culture of simulations.
Hello everybody out there. Welcome to another iteration of the Simulationist podcast. Today is the 18th of August 2013. This is the 50th of these little things that we've been doing and putting up on the internet.
Well, they're an hour and a half long. Would we call them little?
Good question. Little compared to a novel? Yes. Although it's probably more than a novel worth of reading at this point for everything.
That's okay. They don't have to read it all. They just have to listen in the background. They can pick and choose what topics. We've got a library now.
We do. We have lots of stuff to go back and listen to. If you're just picking us up now, you can always go back and listen to the stuff we had before. If you're picking us up in the future, hello. How is the future?
Welcome to the archives. Welcome to this far back in the archives. I hope you enjoyed, iteration 400.
So just so the listeners know who we are, I am Josh Trelevin, as always, and
I'm still Ryan Kirkby.
And Ryan Kirkby's here with me, as always, on the Simulationist podcast. Let's see.
What's been going on for you this week, Josh?
Oh, we'll get into what we've been up to this week. I've been, let me see, almost every week it's Minecraft. This week it's a bit more modding of Minecraft. I think I did the meat blocks last time. Did I? Yeah.
I think we have mentioned them. They're very nice.
Meat blocks. Anyway.
Well, there's something you got to do something with all the zombie meat you wind up collecting, and it's better than feeding dogs eternally. Because I feel bad feeding dogs rotten meat.
Yeah. I try to, like, when I play Minecraft, I try to get, I like being rich in Minecraft, right?
Yeah.
So I like to build a nice big pig farm, and so that, like, my main food is pork chops, and I have so much pork chops I can feed the dogs pork chops all day long.
You are a good owner, Josh.
Yeah. Well, that's what you try and do when you play. Well, I guess not everyone does, but so I added a little feature to the rotten meat block, in that when it rots into dirt, it turns into dirt. It actually emits a little bit XP, like one XP orb.
Just enough to help tide you over, between big projects and mass slaughterings, and give you a reason to create all this fresh dirt, as opposed to just strip mining a certain section no one else is looking at right now.
That's right. But I should, let me see. I will, what I've been doing, because there's a source of dirt, I also thought, maybe I should do like a dirt removal thing, or, a dirt sink, I guess is.
Besides just throwing it in the lava, disposal bin.
Yeah, so what I did was I altered the carrots and potatoes around a little bit. You know how you just plant carrots and potatoes on the surface and they just grow up, and you harvest them directly from the top of the dirt? Well, that's fine. That's realistic, because realistically potatoes and carrots only grow a couple inches into the ground, right?
On the other hand, you do have to really root through the dirt to get all those potatoes out.
Well, I guess I wouldn't really know, because I don't think I've ever harvested potatoes before.
No. Those of you who have gone far back enough will know that Josh hates farming.
Yeah, that's from a very early episode, possibly our first. So basically what I did is I have them, they now grow, the dirt block underneath the plant turns into it's a dirt block with little potato splotches on it.
Oh.
So in order to get the potatoes, you actually have to dig that block away.
Root through the earth and completely upheave everything.
Yeah. And I haven't decided, maybe you can help me decide, Ryan, if I should let the player keep that dirt block, because it drops 4 potatoes. But should it also drop the dirt block, or should it kind of...
Can you give it a 50-50 chance of dropping the dirt block?
That's a thought. Yeah, maybe I should do that.
Yeah. One die 4 potatoes, and 1 die 2 minus 1 chunk of dirt.
Yeah, so a possibility that you might not get dirt. So you get about half your dirt back. So, yeah, that's my project. That's what I've been working on.
And that's good, because I have an idea for making stuff like moonshine once I start learning the modding stuff.
Oh, yes.
Would be, I suppose with that, you make vodka. And so that makes potatoes a little bit more, something you'd want to get.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how you can manage to ferment carrots. I may have to check that up on Google. I'm sure someone's tried to make a carrot liquor before.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I guess you can ferment almost anything you can eat.
Well, here's the thing: the way I figure it is, if we've had people that have decided to ferment trees, and that's how we get turpentine, someone has definitely tried it with carrots.
You might also get turpentine from carrots, for all I know.
Yeah, but it'd be a turpentine that, instead of making you go blind, actually helps your eyesight.
Oh yeah, okay, good thought.
So just one of the many things you can do, maybe in real life too. And that's why it's always good to double check and look things up. You learn more when you ask yourself the questions. Can you ferment carrots? Let's find out.
Indeed. So I think that covers kind of my week. I've also been pretty busy at work, so I haven't had a lot of time, but fit in Minecraft and a bit of modding where I can. So yeah.
Well, I've been doing a little bit in Minecraft. As I mentioned last week, I had a problem with my tiered hillside. I didn't like how it was going. It wasn't, it didn't look right to me. So I did take your advice, and then I just doubled the height. And so now I've got much more flat spaces, much higher up spaces, and it's really invoked my idea, because now I have a 10 high space. I could grow trees inside if I wanted to now. And I was thinking about, what am I going to do now? Because right now I've got just these blank faces with dirt and lines, and we've got natural earth lines there. But I can do something better than that if I really apply myself to. So I've actually been looking at Moorish architecture. They've done some rather nice stuff with color back and forth patterns.
Yeah, like
in their archways,
tiles and stuff.
Yeah, and so I was thinking about maybe rushing myself ahead, building a quick little bridge somewhere, and getting some sheep over so I can get the sheep, dye the wool, and have maybe different shades of green going back and forth for coloration.
Oh, that sounds fun. Hey, by the way, speaking of coloration, have you experimented with the stained clay?
Not yet. I'm collecting a decent amount of clay as I slowly dig down underneath my current tree farm.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm having some fun with that. I decided I got some water in the center, and I'm making a nice glass around that so that whenever I'm working down there, I can tell when it's light outside by whether or not the well that I see is lit or dark.
Oh, that sounds nice.
It is pretty nice. I'm going to have to play around with the wood I'm using a little bit more, because right now I'm using just willow wood, and it's too monochromatic for me.
I see.
Also, I'm not doing anything with it, so it's just a big open space with a bunch of torches to keep, skeletons from hitting me when I'm not paying attention.
Yeah, those big open spaces.
So, like I'm saying, right now I'm going to have to experiment to see what I can do to make it less monochromatic, but I really do like what I'm doing with this underground well line I'm slowly digging down.
Okay, are you the kind of guy who's going to dig it all the way to bedrock?
Maybe not down to the bedrock, but I do believe, at least until I can find out where that cave is underneath, because when I was making the island, I was tossing sand down to get rid of the water where I didn't want it, and then I was filling that up with dirt. Yeah. And when I was down in some areas, I was hearing zombie growls and spider skitters moving around, and I think I heard an Enderman pop in or out once or twice. So there's something down there.
Maybe a big cave. Could be.
I know. It could be very nice. So I'm going to dig down one by one. And I suppose I'm going to convert each layer into its own little town if I can get the opportunity. So I could have multi-tier towns, one on top of another. I think it'd be pretty awesome.
This is a project I've wanted to do for a long time, and that is to do like an underground town, like with buildings built into the walls of caves. Kind of.
Oh, very nice.
Like looking out onto a cave.
Well-lit cave area, and then, yeah, I could see that. I'm picturing it nice in my mind, because you get some really big caverns when you get really down deep.
Yep.
Oh, I like it. And some of them, they have some natural branching paths that come back in on themselves. That could be like nice roads and cul-de-sac type stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
You could do a lot of fun down there.
Yeah.
And then you'd have no reason to visit the surface. Oh, I suppose
Yeah.
once you get the tree farm going on down there.
Yeah, I think the only thing you really need off the surface is the tree farm. Is trees. Maybe cactuses and, I don't know, cocoa beans and stuff like that.
But once you get all those, you can take them down with you.
Yeah.
Although, that's one of the things I like about Dwarf Fortress is they have subterranean trees. Technically, they're giant mushrooms, which should be fairly easy to work underground. But it's not quite the same sort of thing, and I would like to see if I can find a mod that incorporates subterranean trees, so that you can have like subterranean style woods. If nothing else, just a different color to say, oh yes, this is green wood here from the moss plant that grows.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, it would be like an underground variety of tree.
Yeah, so you'd have like these small patches of I suppose it'd be like a miniature version of the mushroom biome where there's just you know, mold growing on the ground and fungal trees coming up.
Yeah. Well, Minecraft is coming up with, I don't think they're doing anything underground, but there are new biomes coming out, and there's a couple of sneak peek shots.
Ooh, I'm going to have to look at those.
The Minecraft site. There's going to be a redwood forest, I think, with giant redwood trees.
Which would basically just be cross between spruce and jungle, I imagine, for coating.
Yeah, and they might just use the same wood out of the spruce. Or
they're probably going to come up with a nice color for it, nice light red coloration
to
it.
Yeah, they might.
Because, that's what's really big about it is, it's a new color of wood. I can do all sorts of fun things with this. A nice little rose-colored wood would be great for some things.
Yeah, well, a lot of people definitely like the new colors of wood. I personally, for some reason, I'm strange, and I don't like anything but the vanilla wood, or the
oak.
Oak. So, yeah.
Well, that's the thing, is I use them for different purposes. I use spruce for my my one big bridge. When I'm building the underground area, I like to use the lighter color of the willows.
Yeah.
Just to make sure they contrast with the darkness of everything down there. It seems a little bit more, at least artificially brighter.
Okay, yeah, that's a good thought.
And when it comes to the thing like I'm edging around for my garden area, I like to use the oak for that.
Oh, cool.
And then I just wind up using the jungle wood for, convert it to charcoal.
Right, sure.
Something's got to burn. Something's got to be used for sticks and all that, and that's what I use.
Cool.
Everything has its purpose, and it's all nicely color coordinated. If you can tell the difference.
Yeah. Well, that's a good way to handle it.
It makes sense in my mind. But yes, I also managed to pick up a $5 game this week.
Okay.
I like to explore things, and cheap things are the best to explore. So I got a game called Space Force Captains, which is incredibly generic named. No offense to the people at Provox Games or Joe Wood, but as soon as I started playing it, I realized I've effectively already played this game. Mm-hmm. It is the Champions of Might and Magic in space.
Okay.
Yeah. You're in space, but everything's on a two-dimensional playing field, and all the fights take place on a two-dimensional map. You have many different resources, but it's effectively the same resource sort of things you would get in the medieval fantasy world. You got to collect these things to get improve your space stations, which work as cities. Mm-hmm. And these help you to buy better items and units that you utilize to attack your enemy. Whoever gets the most units they can afford per week turn manages to effectively win without the use of abilities and magics and psionics and high techs.
Okay, is this a multiplayer game or single?
I believe it's only single. I've just worked my way through the tutorial.
Okay.
It's not a bad game. I like it because it's turn-based. It does have at least a couple elements of strategy. So speaking as a father who does occasionally have to deal with a kid who has just woken up, it's nice to know there's still games out there that effectively don't need to pause. All I have to do is stop doing what I'm doing, and everything just sits there waiting for me.
Okay, yeah.
So I do like it that way. That said, if I had the choice over again, I'd probably wait till Steam had a sale and then pick up the classic X-Force. Or the XCOM game with
UFO
your
Defense.
Yes. Although I hear the new one's definitely worth every penny you pay for it. I like the unbalanced lethality at the beginning for your players, and then the unbalanced lethality for the enemy later on in the game once you research the right skills. So.
Okay. Well, that sounds kind of like a fun swing.
It is. I do have some other problems with Space Force captains in that I really don't know what any of the technology I'm researching does.
Okay.
And, it's not as clear as it could be.
You know, it's funny because I picture like the generals and the people in charge of the Pentagon. You know how they show up in movies and like they're like, I don't care what it does, it's just got to blow up or whatever. And then he's the guy who signs the paycheck or the order or whatever. And it's like, are you kind of like in a similar position to that guy? It's like, I don't care the details, just make it blow up.
Well, right now it's just like, I don't care what it is. It's a Tier 3 technology. I'm going to pay 9,000 credits so I can have this technology. And if I figure out what it does later, all the better.
Be a good like webcomic to have like, your rank and file guys as the focus, and they're like talking about the overlord or whatever who's the player. It's like, I demand this technology. Why are you asking for that?
It has no applicability. It doesn't matter. It's Tier 3. Say, well, okay, I guess I can't argue with that logic.
Yeah, so somebody out there with artistic skills, get on that.
Or at least, like the ability to draw an item good once and then copy-paste.
Oh yeah, that'll do.
I've known a few webcomics that managed to last very well that way. And nothing wrong with that. It's a way to make it work. Especially, in between, the proper creative artistic styles. I remember Scott Kurtz from PvP effectively just had his characters done in a bunch of poses for a while, and then he'd effectively trace them over as he was doing his comic. He'd spend more time creating the plot, and then once the plot was done, the punchline was good, then he'd effectively do the quick, cartoon draw up, and then that's done, nice and easy. And then when he had spare time, he'd improve on his art skills. Improve on the art skills, come up with more poses, and before you knew it, there was enough different poses. Few people could actually tell without, looking at them side by side, saying, oh, he just, effectively copy-paste or traced his own work here.
Well, I mean, if you do hundreds of strips about the same characters, I think, eventually...
Well, that's the thing is, he's also changed his art style a few times, upgraded the characters. Yeah. And so it's kind of nice to see that way, that even if you don't have the greatest amount of art talent, as long as you have a little bit, and you're willing to be a little tricky, you can make it work for you, at least until you improve to the point where you'd be drawing freehand every time.
Yeah. Well, I remember when I used to... when I was a kid, I used to read the comics in the newspaper, and then later on I would go back and I'd be like, I'll have a look at some of the older versions. They'd have them collected in the store,
yes.
Big collection.
The trade paperback.
Garfield or what else is there?
Garfield's changed a lot since his early days.
Well, that was a big surprise to me when I guess I was a teenager when I first found out that Garfield went back,
Garfield used to be really big and ugly and fat.
Yeah, and then...
Now he's just kind of cutesy and pudgy. He's not really fat.
Yeah, and, well, to me, like, I always thought that the newer Garfield kind of looked better, looked cleaner, looked more, like...
Oh, definitely.
Consumable as a, thing for people.
Well, nobody wants to spend, 5 days a week, reading a punchline involving, like, a big, fat, ugly cat.
Well, and the weird thing about Garfield is the character is supposed to still be big, a
well,
fat,
I mean, they
lazy,
draw the belly
ugly,
fairly round, but he's still got those stick legs and arms now. That the noodle sort of physics for his arms.
Yeah.
But before, you'd see the cat haunches, and he'd have big freaking jowls, and it's like there wouldn't even be like anything for a neck for him. It'd just be head on top of the big blob. So I think he looks much better now.
Yeah.
At least for commercial, entertainment purposes.
I guess. And, well, I don't follow Garfield anymore. And obviously they're into movies now. And there's Garfield minus Garfield, which doesn't even require having a cat there.
I hear Jim Davis actually really likes that one.
He liked it.
Yeah. Well, he says it gives him an interesting sense of perspective as to who John is. Like, he had never considered John as how lonely he is, and this apparently helped him come to the realization John needs something besides just his pets. Because if you were to just, take Garfield out, or heck, even replace it with a picture of a normal cat, John is an incredibly depressed, incredibly sad man. Sure, he's supposed to be comic relief, but he's not supposed to be that sad and pathetic, and that's why now he's got an official girlfriend with Liz, the veterinarian.
Okay.
Because of Garfield
Yeah.
minus Garfield, the artist saw how sad the guy's life was and says, I gotta throw this poor sad sack a bone, man. And bam, he's got himself a girlfriend.
That's funny because I always pictured Jim Davis laughing maniacally at John's foibles and basically like...
Well, so that's the thing, is it looks completely different with Garfield responding as opposed to nobody there. John looks serious. He looks psychopathically alone and sad.
Yeah, but aren't we... I mean, that's the thing about... That's supposed to make Garfield relatable is that we all feel sort of how John feels sometimes. We sometimes
But
feel
here's the thing,
lonely.
is with Garfield there speaking, you get the sense that it's not just John. He's acting against real stimuli. But let's face it, a cat is not supposed to be, what Garfield is. And so if you see him as a man with a normal cat or a man with nobody there, he looks really insane. He looks like he's responding against no actual stimuli. He's just responding to the crazy thoughts in his own head. Which is an interesting way to interpret Garfield, that Garfield isn't actually speaking or anything. That's just what John thinks he's hearing Garfield think.
Well, because Garfield doesn't speak in speech bubbles. He speaks in thought bubbles.
Exactly.
So John doesn't actually hear Garfield say what he...
And yet there's been enough instances where he effectively knows what Garfield's thinking or thought saying for it to be him talking. Except for the occasional joke where they say, why won't you talk to me? Where he's shaking a cat before he realizes he's shaking a cat and asking it to talk to him. Because that's the occasional good joke they put out a few times a year.
He shook Garfield?
I remember it for once, where is this? Why won't you tell me? As he shakes Garfield, and then he realizes what he's doing, and Garfield gets ready to maul the ever-loving crap out of him with his claws. Because Garfield's a violent character sometimes.
But didn't John have a dog for a while, or is that...
He still has Odie. Yeah.
Okay.
Although Odie is technically Lyman's, and Lyman hasn't been seen in a long time.
All right. And there was another cat, too. John's
Nermal.
like a hoarder. He's got
Well, he's only
two
really...
cats and a
Well,
dog.
here's the thing. He's got 2 cats and a dog at the best. A man stuck in the basement. That's where I think Lyman is.
Okay.
And Davis himself has said, don't look too deep into Arbuckle's basement. So, it's not quite, but almost canon.
Okay, yeah.
But I don't think Nermal's actually belongs to him. I believe Nermal's like some other person's cat who just comes over. Because Nermal's not there all the time or even anywhere near the frequency.
Now, this is something I never did. I owned a cat for many years, and I never had cat dates.
It's not a bad idea, I suppose, but I think Nermal only comes on the scene when it suits for the purpose of the story.
Okay, yeah.
That's the thing, it's not doing too much for story much either these days. I did like Garfield better when they had the storylines for him, like Garfield Christmas, and then, oh yeah, there's actual ghost pirates. Holy crap. And
Okay.
Him and Odie dressed up, like as pirates, wind up getting involved with these ghost pirates. It's a plot, it's a story, and I liked it. Even if it didn't always hit on all cylinders, it made for a decent little movie they'd put out every now and then.
Oh,
so Garfield
feature, okay. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing, is they made it in the comic strip, and so it run for like a month or two as Garfield has his Halloween story, or Garfield has his Christmas story, and then later on they made it into the direct-to-TV area, direct-to-video movies.
Oh, well, yeah, sure. I guess that's fair enough. I mean, it's in some ways it's just like, well, taking the old, the pirate story. Well, we'll just, I guess they're scraping the bottom of the barrel for ideas.
Well, here's the thing. I liked it more, and I was okay with people razzing Garfield when they was all just, oh, I hate Mondays. Oop and gulp, I eat too much food. Haha. I don't like that stuff. That's too simple. It's not really much of a joke. When Garfield does something, when he's got a story, I was okay with that. If anybody said I hated the Garfield, movies, I'd have fought against them on that. I'm not big on Garfield. I'm not big on commercialism, but I'd have fought them on that ground because at least Garfield's doing something there, as opposed to just I hate Mondays, kick Odie off the table, fall asleep for 18 hours.
Although I suppose that has its own poetry, but yeah, like you can't really. It's a statement about art because you can't really do art in which nothing happens and still be successful at it.
And yet, for a while there, Jim Davis was effectively giving off the artwork to other people to do, and they'd come up with it through, like a group of them. They'd draw the cartoons, whichever ones get accepted, the people get paid for.
Yeah, I suppose it's a little bit crazy to accuse Jim Davis of artistic integrity, but...
Well, it's just the thing, is thanks to stuff like Garfield minus Garfield, he's getting more back involved into it. He's coming more hands-on back as he sees that people are criticizing him because the jokes aren't really funny for this sort of stuff. And so he gets back in and he gives it more of a look-see. He gives it back and he says, okay, we can do more with this. And without him there, with him going hands-off, you couldn't have the stories. You couldn't have anything racier than I hate Mondays, arg Mondays, pie to the face. You couldn't have anything racier than that because, he didn't okay that sort of thing. It was all done by a committee. And that's what happens when you work with art by committee. It has to appeal to the most people possible with offending the least amount of people possible. Has to come out bland.
Yeah.
It's like cheese at a fast food place. You're never going to find blue cheese at McDonald's. Why not? Because blue cheese isn't going to, make everybody happy. Some people will go, oh, blue cheese, that's like mold on there. I don't want that at all. I'm not going to eat there. It offends some people. You're never going to see it in any place made by committee that has to appeal to as many as possible.
I bet that I will put my money down. I think in 3 years McDonald's will have something with blue cheese in it. I think they're going that direction.
Okay, I'll take you up on that.
I bet you...
whatever blue cheeseburger that they come up with then. We'll see if it's any good.
Let's see. If they make it, you have to buy it for me.
All right.
Right? And you can have one if you want.
Well, I probably will at least give it a try.
But if in 3 years they don't make one, then I have to buy you, I don't know, like a Big Mac or...
let's just make it McNuggets. If I'm going bad, I'm at least going bad with chicken.
I'll buy you a meal at McDonald's, which will not include blue cheese, if they don't have blue cheese in 3 years.
Even if it's a temporary thing, though, right? Like the McRib is like a temporary that they bring back 3 times a year.
Yeah, well, I'll take that, because that's in my favor, so sure.
Well, I'm willing to grant it, because in this day and age, you got to cycle through the new product, even if it's only coming out for 2 months, and then you take it back off. So I'll see you on that one. I'll give you that extra length.
Very good.
Because I know they tried the Reubens for a little while, and the other big classy sandwiches, but that never caught on. Same with the pizza. Same with all this and all that.
Yeah, they do try different things. Did we ever get through what your simulated week was?
I think we got off on some very interesting tangents about artistic integrity.
Oh yeah, okay.
And I'm okay with that. But yes, by and large, Space Force Captains, not a great game, but I suppose it was worth $5.
Okay, so I guess I can put a link to a Wikipedia or something, some article to where...
It's not worth hunting down, honestly.
Okay.
I don't... Well, no offense to the people at Provox Games or Joe Wood, but it definitely smacks of we have to produce some product, and this meets the quality guidelines. We'll put it out.
Yeah. Okay.
I think they were doing that to help make money for something bigger that they were working on. This was just a tide me over sort of commission game.
Well, hopefully. Yeah, I don't know.
That's it. It's good enough for if you get it for $5, you're not going to be too disappointed. There might be more in there, but I haven't been able to find out of the game yet.
Okay. Well, yeah, maybe we'll return to it next week. And
I've been dividing my efforts in a lot of places. I mean, I've made it halfway through the latest book I'm reading. I've just devoured it. The pace is going great, and I just one more chapter. And next thing you know, I've shorted myself on sleep in the last 4 nights.
Yeah, I sometimes do that. Well, I've done that ever since I was a kid.
Yeah, but 4 nights in a row. I'm sleeping more per night than I'm working during the day. On a good week, but not this week. Now, I'm doing 7 hours work on 6 hours sleep. So, the book must be going good if I'm doing that to myself.
Yeah, well, at least you have something exciting to think about while you're at work. You can think about all the things you read and think about what's going to happen next.
And that's how I came about the latest topic for this week.
Okay, let's jump into that.
Because I've been reading The Wheel of Time. And in the one chapter, the main character, Randall Thor, he goes to the Forbidden City that people that aren't of the blood are supposed to enter. He's allowed to enter in because...
is he of the blood?
He very well may be. The people of the blood look like they could be his cousins.
Okay, yeah.
He's a fact, as it turns out, he may have been like a foster kid raised, by non-biological parents. And And so he's in the one place, and he goes to where if you want to be a chieftain for these people, you have to go through this. Not everybody makes it. And so he goes through the glowing pillars, and every step he takes forward, he gets flashes of what these people were like as they go further and further back in time.
Okay. Yeah.
And so I found this to be a great way of learning the backstory. Like, there's a lot of backstory in the Wheel of Time series.
Yeah.
And so he takes a step, and then it's like how the city came to be. He takes another step, and it's how the tribes came to be versus the true main tribe that made the place that no longer exists, and how they separate out, and how the people became as they are. And the more further you step back, the more you realize what things used to be like, the greatness of this, or this. They have a magical tree. You sit beneath it and you get nice and calm and placid.
Uh-huh.
It's one tree. It's like the tree of life. But you know what? You go back to as far back as you can for these people, back when they were something else before the horrible cataclysm destroyed everything, and now it's a horrible, barbarous land.
Okay.
These trees lined every city. If the city did not have these trees, it was considered barbaric. It was considered not worthy of being called civilization.
Oh, that's
Now there's
interesting.
only one tree left on the planet. And it's like the tree that people associate with the tree that Buddha sits under, or the tree, the apple tree with the tree that hits Newton on the head and he learns about gravity. It's considered like an epic thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
It used to just line the ways, man. It was just something like palm trees down in Los Angeles.
So when you're reading this chapter in the book, does it feel like you're, let's see, are you seeing it through the eyes of the dude?
Well, see, that's the thing. Is
it more
every
like
time
history?
every time Rand steps forward, he gets another flash of vision. He becomes the protagonist of whose story bit they're telling, and so because you're reading it through him, you become the person. You see what's going on as though it was something like, I guess, kind of like being filmed.
All right, is this like chapter after chapter? Or
It's all in one chapter. Every step he
so
takes
it's
is
kind of
it's like
summary.
another couple paragraphs of the point in time, and then it goes back like 2-3 generations. Oof. And then you see the changes that make and what caused it and how the people separated. And so you've got these people here now that were nothing like how they used to be, even though they still consider themselves to be this people, and how it branches off, how it splinters, and how everything changed the way it was. I really like it. And I like the fact that it worked itself backwards as opposed to, in the beginning it was this, and then these people went this way, and then they split into these groups here, and and they became these 3 groups of people now that you know.
Yeah, because can you remember back to high school? And I don't know if you took history courses in university, but you must have taken high school history.
I did take some high school history. I took some university history.
Okay. And like textbooks, I always thought they were kind of a little bit dry and stuff, like when you're getting that kind of detail. It's like it's not told in story form. It's very compressed. It's like background, but so in the
life was hard coming over to Canada. It usually took 3 months, and there was a 25% chance of death.
Well, and sometimes it's just like numbers and names. It's like,
I know.
so and so was born in this year, crossed over in this year, married, but she died, but they had a kid, and then she married again, and this year, and it's like date after name.
I know, it's very dry, which is why I liked reading this chapter about it, because it wasn't, these happened, they didn't even give like how far back this was. It's just that every step forward he took, he went further back. And so there was no dates, it was just people and circumstances, and what they had to do to survive and become, how they became the people they are now.
Now here, what about this? Do you think it makes a difference that he was going, as he walked into the chamber or whatever, that he was going back in time? Would it, if he had reversed it and done like the earliest history first?
I don't think it would have been as good, because they started off so many millennia, I suppose, ago, completely different people. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, they're called the Aiel. Sorry.
Okay.
And they're effectively savage killers, nasty people living in an even more savage land. They can, walk over like gravel and make not a sound. They can kill, 10 normal people for every one they lose. They are masters. But, you go back the many, many millennia until, the day that somebody decided it would be a good idea to bore into what is effectively Satan's prison for energy.
Okay.
Back then, they were like just people that worked on the crops, helped serve the big people that really had the magical power. They were caretakers and farmers. They were not as they are. And so if it started off that way and then you slowly saw them become as they are now, it wouldn't be the same. But by seeing how they are now, how they were a few generations ago, how they were a few generations before that, and as it goes back up and up, you start seeing the lines. You start seeing, okay, I recognize this part of their culture. Ah, that's where it started from. Oh, that's where these people came from. They had a disagreement on that, and that's why they split, and they both are as they are now. And oh, this is what they did to forsake their oath. They don't even know that unless they go through there and become a chieftain. And so they all know, and they know why the names are as they are. And it all comes together, as opposed to just going on and them coming apart. And so I like the going back in time sort of thing. Very nice way of telling it. And it was a great way of telling the backstory, which is always a hard thing to do. You may have a great, setting in your mind. You may have a great, background for the novel you're planning on writing. But if you can't get a nice way to tell it that people want to read it, it's dry and it's boring. And I'll level with you. Some of Tolkien's stuff is a little dry and boring because it reads not like an epic, story of like Beowulf, but more like, and then the elf lord went to this place and he searched the ruins, finding nothing for 2 years. He went to this ruins and searched again.
Well, that might be, the Silmarillion. Silmarillion is kind of like that. The Lord of the Rings I've always
That's
found.
the thing. Yeah, the Lord of the Rings is a good read, but it doesn't tell as much backstory. It's there, and what's presented gets revealed in little fragments you throw at there. You see, you eat them up. You eat it. Oh, some more backstory. Oh, I'll go for that. His other works, they're fairly dry, and they go out in just a linear fashion. And I'll admit, it's not exciting for me to read. I'm not that big of a history buff reading it that way. But what was told in this story here, it was great. I loved it. And I found it especially interesting because yesterday night I saw The Mummy's Tomb, a 1942 Universal horror flick involving a mummy. Because, who else are you going to have in The Mummy's Tomb? And,
but Daddy?
Well, he never got a chance to become a daddy because the woman he loved was dead before they could apparently consummate and sire offspring.
And if he's a mummy, he's dead too. So.
Well, the thing is, apparently he's alive. He's kept alive through what's called tanna leaves. The tanna plant no longer exists, but they got a big thing of leaves that they, get some sort of stuff out of them. Maybe the source of where you get their trioxin for zombies in the Nights of the Living Dead. I don't know.
Okay, yeah.
But, it's just fan fiction coming out of my head there.
Sure.
But he's got a heartbeat. And they referenced that in the previous movie, because this would be like the third in a series, that, the one guy, puts his hand there, and he's able to feel a pulse on the zombie. Or, sorry, on the mummy. Mm-hmm. And so technically he's alive, so he's not really undead, but he's just, the tanna leaves keep him from dying.
Sure.
So it's probably a more hideous fate than being dead and coming back when you think about it.
I don't know. Does it go into have him show him hanging around and drinking coffee or? Well,
no. That's the thing is they distill whatever's in the tanna leaves. 3 tanna leaves is all it takes. They distill it down and they give him drops in the mouth.
Yeah. And what does he do all day?
Whatever they tell him to. Not only does it make you keep you alive against your will, what appears to be. It also forces you to obey what the person who put them in the mouth tells you to do.
And was he some kind of pharaoh? Is that?
No. He was fairly high up enough to know where they keep, the secrets of life and death. So, you got caught stealing it from the Temple of Isis. And that's the punishment for him, for trying to steal the secrets of life and death from the mystical being who stole the secrets of life and death from other people.
Okay, I'm liking this story.
It's not bad. It's a good story, and they made sure after the first movie to change the names so they're unique characters.
Yeah.
But at the start of the third movie, it takes place 30 years after the last one. And it's got because I saw it last week, the previous one, the second one.
Yeah.
And so it's got him as an aged person. It only took place 2 years later in real life, so they had to artificially age him up.
Yeah.
But he's the old man talking to his son now about the events of his life and how he met, his future wife, which is the kid's mother. Mm-hmm. And so at the beginning of the movie effectively starts as a 10-minute recap of the previous movie.
Oh, yeah, that doesn't sound quite right.
And that's what got me.
It's
not a bad way. If you've never seen the first two movies, it's a good way to get you up to speed as to why there's a mummy coming after him, why they're moving the mummy to America, to try and fulfill this ancient curse. It's not great. It's a little cumbersome though, by any stretch. And it occurs to me, you know what? They told the backstory much better in this book, and you could probably work out something like that. And so what do you think for backstories? Is there like a definitive better way to do it, or is this like the old man telling a story for his kids adequate enough?
Well, my current viewpoint on this, which it has changed back and forth, my current viewpoint on it is get into the action as quick as possible. So have a very identifiable goal. Like you need to care about that initial character, but it can be something fairly small. But a character's in danger, or a character's trying to get something, or trying to get away from something. So you start with that kind of action, very simple, kind of primal goal, like fear or survival, something like that, and then gradually work in, add bits to the story, and explain about the character.
All right, so then for the mummy's tomb, what would have been a better style, we can say, is instead of just him sitting around talking to his kid and the kid's future wife, and telling how he met the mom, is instead, no, he's never mentioned that part of their life, how they met and decided to get married. Mm-hmm. And so you could mention that, and then instead of having him be the first victim, it's the other people, as the mummy tries to get to him, and that he eventually has to break down and explain the horrible secret he's been hiding for so many decades. So that way you want it, you're craving the info. Why is this mummy coming after him? Why is this horrible force that death itself cannot claim coming after him?
Yeah, I think that'd be a good way to do it. That's how I would say to do it. It's funny because I'll bring up Lost. We've talked about Lost before too. Lost kind of goes to the other extreme. It's like they just go straight into action and things happening and people in conflict, and you don't get the backstory. And in some cases, you're craving it, and in some cases, you never get a satisfactory story.
And that's why for all that I loved of Lost, I hated it all the more.
Yeah.
I loved Hurley, though. He was a nice guy. The big guy who
oh, yeah. Okay, I remember.
Who never did skinny down, despite the fact that they're barely making ends meet for food sometimes.
I don't know if that would be an artifact of the fact that it's
an actor as opposed to
or
the situation.
If there's something story-wise going on there, too.
I think they may have had something story-wise going on. Maybe like a secret stash or something like that. But I don't think they ever really told that backstory there either.
Yeah, it's true.
Okay, so now Lost does present an interesting way of telling the backstory in that it never gives you anything definitive, but it does give you an interesting amount of clues that you can place together, and if you place them together in your mind right, the backstory effectively is revealed to you. Or at least enough of it for it to make sense. On the other hand, that does leave the possibility of everybody mucking it up rather badly. Like, they misinterpreted this clue, next thing you know, epileptic trees. There was an invisible creature there, the trees were having seizures. That's why everything was shaking. So I suppose you really have to be quite a good storyteller, or, I suppose in this case, director and writer, to get that done so that the people won't come to it the wrong conclusion.
It's probably it would be somewhere in the middle, and I suppose it would take some skill or just some rewriting. If you basically you create your story and then you look at it again, you can see where you think there are holes, and this is why you pass it off to other people to look at.
Or you could just call it the Chris Carter effect. You use those holes to come up with a whole other branching plot. And before you know what, you've got some sort of monster, tree with 100 different, main trunk limbs, and nothing ever is fully answered.
Well,
no offense to you, Mr. Chris Carter. You've done some very nice series, but have the answer before you start asking the question when you're like the main storyteller.
Yeah, a degree of that is good because it sparks that creativity and it brings you to something new. But it helps if you don't go completely off the edge with that.
I remember hearing about Chris Claremont and his run on X-Men, and he had so many threads going on, so many things. They are still wrapping them up. He was working on them in the 80s, and they're still wrapping up some of these storylines. Although you have to wonder exactly who they're telling the answer to these storylines, for. How many people have been reading the comics, for X-Men that dedicatedly for now 3 decades? So.
I don't know how many people read the X-Men. I actually, or no, not X-Men, X-Files?
Oh, it's the X-Men in this case. Chris Claremont versus Chris Carter.
Okay.
They're both CCs, but yeah. Different works, different style. So then, just a quick off the top of your head, what do you think would be the best telling of a backstory you've ever seen?
Telling of a backstory. Yeah. Way to put me on the spot here.
That's why I said just off the top of your head.
Off the top of my head, I have to think of one example, and then I have to consider whether I think it's good.
Because I've been working through a couple different campaigns in D&D as I think about the whole thing, and the only case where a dry run of information really worked well for me was in the Ravenloft setting, where you just read the timeline as it starts not at year 1 really, because they already had a calendar system they were using there. As it runs through, and then if you read it that way, it's like this happens, and you get the sense that they're throwing out little clues to you, and then everything kind of comes together that way. In which case, the front way storytelling works. The grand conjunction goes awry at the last moment. The 5th and 6th prophecies happened in the wrong order, and everything goes weird. Which I do very much appreciate on that. Most people who would have gone for something like, oh no, the prophecy happened in the wrong order, everything goes boom now. No. They said, okay, prophecy 5 and 6 happened in the wrong order, and so things get weird. And then they have fun changing it up. And I think that's a much better way of rather than, the rocks fall, everybody dies. And I definitely encourage that for anybody working in a campaign that tries to forecast the future.
Well, here's one. I'll give you an example. I think the Star Wars backstory, before the prequels came out.
Oh, all the backstory, the huge amounts of backstory for the expanded universe.
I thought that was done very well and paced well. Because, Luke learns little things about his father, and he doesn't find out until the second film.
No, you're not my father.
Yeah, and that sort of thing. I thought that was paced really well, which is why some of the earlier films are a shame that they got made or that they were done the way they were done.
To some sense. I would like to see how they progress in the next set of trilogies.
Yeah, we have more coming up. So
Hooray.
We'll see how good they are.
But here's the thing with that is there is a lot of backstory in what's going on with the Star Wars universe.
Yeah.
And I do appreciate them telling the prequels just to see how it came about that way. Mm-hmm. Palpatine's going to win. He's going to wind up taking over things. It's kind of nice to see how, and in the end it involves Yoda flipping out and doing, like martial arts and Jedi light fights.
That's true. So basically, like, once your daughter is old enough to see Star Wars, are you going to show them in 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3 order?
I believe so, although I have been told there is another order that has been devised as the best one that in the best order of things, although they say for that one, don't show episode 1. It's not part of their list. Their best.
So start at 2?
Well, that's the thing is it skips back and forth between them, and so it's an interesting arrangement from the old series and the new together.
Like even within films, it's like 30 minutes of episode 4.
No, thankfully it's not that
Okay.
bad. It's you watch this one from the first trilogy and this one from the prequel trilogy, and then you kind of work it around and you watch these two together and how it works out. Which interesting concept. I don't think I'll do it that way. It's just especially because the styles are so different between the CGI. As much as George Lucas wanted to keep updating for CGI, you can definitely tell the different feel. Between the Muppets and the CGI creatures they put in the background, if nothing else.
Yeah, well, I think that's why he kept on going back to it. He kept on changing it because he was never satisfied with the transition between the old Muppet style and the CGI style. Which, by the way, even the Star Wars CGI from Episode 1, 2, 3 is beginning to look dated at this point.
And that's why I always maintain he should have kept the Muppets. The real action, hand up the sleeve Muppets.
Yeah.
Because when you have a style, an artistic style, it doesn't matter how goofy things start looking. Like with WoW, it looks a little cartoony, it looks a little low res, but it's the style that they're working with, so they can get away with it. They're not saying, oh, you don't have proper hair textures on the Tor, and how low graphics, how low res, ew. No, this is the style we're working with, and as long as we maintain the style for everybody, it works. It's only when they update the models with more points of articulation, like the elves and the Pandaren, that you really start seeing how blocky some of the older models are. Which apparently they're thinking of updating, so they'll fix that when they get around to it, which is anywhere between now and the heat death of the universe.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing about Lucas's work, and this also includes some of his other films, like the one that we watched together. Willow, Labyrinth.
Oh yeah, Labyrinth is the one we saw together.
No, was George Lucas involved in that one?
George Lucas, was deeply involved with that.
Okay.
They were all side by side back then.
Okay, so I just want to say about those, like those big major Muppet productions, is that those were for many years were the best way.
The only way you could present a Muppet in such styles.
To do, like, if you were going to do aliens or monsters or whatever, stuff like that, it was either that or animation, right?
Well, I mean, remember back to, did you ever see the first Alien movie?
Yeah.
It was not a CGI alien. It was just a really tall, skinny guy that they had dressed up in there, so it was a man in a suit.
Yeah. Well, fortunately, they didn't show him too much.
No, it was a him.
A him in the suit, but the alien was a her. Right?
I think all of those aliens, except the Queen, are technically like near hermaphroditic because they all help create more of themselves. I think there's something going on that they had originally planned for that second mouth for an impregnation type thing. I can't recall off the top of my head, though, whether or not they used that in the later movies or just abandoned it for scary second mouth. Blah, blah, blah.
So the point I was trying to make about George Lucas is I think he wants to be at the forefront of technology, no matter where that is.
Well, he does have the whole, or had the whole Lucasfilm Industries and THX thing.
Yeah, so he wants to make things look the best he possibly can. So I understand if he's riding the curve, like always staying at the head of it. But also, there are those kind of artistic or crafty kind of, like, things that deliberately don't look realistic.
Well, I think you can always take a good point from Jurassic Park. Dinosaurs still look great, despite the fact they were mostly CGI for a lot of the scenes where they had to be running. But they used a lot of close animatronic stuff, so when the T-Rex looks in the place and his pupils dilate and he blinks, that's not anything more than Muppetry. But technically they look a little foolish now because, well, apparently dinosaurs had feathers.
Yeah, all the dinosaurs in that movie should have had feathers.
They were all plucked bald, effectively, and maybe they were doing that on purpose. You can add as a backstory element to them.
Sure, yeah. Maybe it was just a mutation.
Yeah, they're all, hairless versions of what they should be, the featherless versions. But eventually, there comes a point where you realize time is going to march on. What we think is looking great is going to look foolish and outdated. So the best you can do is encapsulate the now and run with it. Like 30, 40 years from now, maybe they'll use Jurassic Park as an example of how slow and weird and dull we thought dinosaurs were. We know them to be articulated, and they actually had some signs of what we could consider animal culture. Some animals getting like nests together and decorating them. Birds do that now. They'll decorate up with stuff to say, oh, look how good of a mate I can be. I've got colorful things that make me more noticeable here in my nest, and yet I can defend myself. I must be a great mate. And so maybe the dinosaurs had something like that, but we just can't prove it yet.
Actually, what I'd be interested to know about and we already know that the velociraptors weren't as big as they are in the movie. So you probably
but they look more dangerous when they're bigger. So
Yeah, I suppose there's things like terror birds, which people would attack people.
Pterodactyls.
No, I'm thinking of something else. But anyways, That's another topic.
Technically, they weren't dinosaurs. Same with the ones that went in the sea. They were apparently not all qualified as being dinosaurs. They're just ancient beasties that happened to be around at the same time.
Yeah, true. Okay, so let me see. Were we on backstories?
Yes, we were working on backstories. But yeah, so the backstory of what is the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park changed. Not because they wanted to change the backstory in the Jurassic Park movie, but because science and technology has progressed on and we're able to find out these new bits of information. So at some point with this case, you just have to say, okay, no. The backstory for the Jurassic Park is dinosaurs were always lizardy type things. They didn't have feathers. We're not wrong. This is just what you see it as because, we didn't know any better. We would have changed it if we did. The end.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, as opposed to the George Lucas method of let's go back and CGI them in.
Let's fix it all. Feathers for everybody.
Although I would enjoy watching in Jurassic Park if they did that.
Well, it's not exactly the newest film. They could always go for another remake now. I mean, they didn't wait that long between Spider-Man, series to do a remake. Jurassic Park. That said, I don't know if they'll manage to get the big budget for it and get the same crowds they did back when.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Yeah, I guess the film industry is a little bit different now.
I'd give it another 10 years, and then I think you could say everything's been updated enough we can retell the story again. Or maybe say, we're going to follow it closer to the book this time, and then we're going to get it really nice. Because apparently there was some nice changes from the book to the movie. And that's always a nice way of saying, oh yeah, we want to make sure it's truer to the book. Or we had another vision style for it this way. It doesn't always work well. I mean, the new Total Recall movie was apparently a complete mess.
Yeah. Well, I like backstories in futuristic movies because it's often told by some guy on a computer. It's or a DVD leaving behind a message for himself or for somebody else. It's this really.
I did like that part of Total Recall. Yeah. He tells himself the backstory. Very nice way because that way as you learn about what his real history is, you learn about what's going on for the society, the culture, why Mars has got its own government and they're not pumping air out. That said, once again, because technology progresses on, when you're rooting yourself in what's supposed to be the real world, you come up against complications as time goes on. Mm-hmm. We know that Mars can't handle an atmosphere. It doesn't have a magnetic core. It doesn't have the magnetosphere that keeps the solar radiation from blowing all the atmosphere out into space. Mm-hmm. Everything that he did to create the oxygen on Mars is not going to last beyond the next solar storm. Whoopsie doodle.
Yeah.
So again, if you're basing stuff in real world history, you got to be very careful with that, or just embrace it. I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing a movie where they took the Jules Verne era thoughts, for what space is like, so that all you need is a balloon, and then you can float your way to the moon. There must be air up there, right? Yeah, let's keep going. Mm-hmm. And it would be nice to embrace that era's thought and mentality and make it your own. Which is why I really like the movie Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow.
Oh yeah.
They really didn't didn't really care exactly how the giant robots were able to move with the square cube laws going on there. No, they're giant robots. They look like giant automaton marching out from a 1930s comic book. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, sure.
So with the addition of style, you can get away with a lot more for that sort of stuff. But the backstory in that one got told nicely because it was, again, in pieces.
Yeah.
Who is, the guy, who is Toten Tots? What's going on? Why is he collecting these things here?
Yeah.
What aren't the scientists telling? You could have just a scientist sit down and tell, the investigator, the whole story. The investigative reporter. And then they go from there. It's not going to be the same.
Yeah, well, a lot of movies and plots are written as mysteries or as, a main character trying to uncover what happened, which is it may be the only way to really parse out a complicated story, is in that sort of
especially when you're up against the 2-hour time limit. Like writing a novel, you could just put in an additional chapter at the end saying, history of dwarves is like this. Mm-hmm. And that'll work, I suppose. Not great, but it's a way of doing it.
Yeah.
As opposed to, okay, we've got 120 minutes to tell this story from start to finish. because we're not certain if we can get a sequel out of it. Depends on how the box office ratings are. Tell as much as you can. Go.
Mm-hmm.
I do like the Shadowrun style. In the beginning of every edition, they have basically how they got from our history to their present.
Yeah.
And so it goes as, okay, at this point, like dwarf and elf babies were happening, and then Goblinization Day, and these legal cases gave rise to the mega corporations as we know them, with their ability and allowance to shoot you dead if they're on the property and suffer no legal ramifications.
Now here's something different. I don't think this applies to Shadowrun, but maybe it does. In that, how much of the backstory do you believe, and do you see it as being sort of biased through the writer?
Well, so that's the interesting thing is they do tell it from it's supposed to be somebody writing a document for those not in the know, so you get a quick primer, and so it's very much potentially a person just knowing the facts and writing them out to you like he's telling you a story.
Yeah.
So potentially an unreliable narrator, yes. That said, they do give you as much information as you need.
I guess, yeah, because it's also directed at the game master who has to sort of know these things.
Yeah. But it does say it with the perspective of okay, you're about to do these quasi to wholly illegal operations. Why should you not trust the Seder Krupp Mega Corporation? Okay, well here's how it goes there, chummer. And yeah, okay, maybe it's not fair. Maybe you can sometimes trust a dragon in dealings. But here's how they set it up. And so if the game master wants to change it, they always say you're free to change it however you want. It's your game. We're not going to tell you how we do it. Here's just how it is for us. Modify as you desire. Which I do always like that caveat. It's your game. Don't feel obligated to be wedged into what we're doing here, presenting for you.
Well, I wish that we thought more that way when it came to television and novels and movies. In that, maybe it did happen a different way, and maybe you just saw it through a bias.
On the other hand, if you work at that too easily, you come up with the Book of Shadows version for the Blair Witch Project. The Book of Shadows being the sequel. Apparently the director didn't like the first movie. Why they got him to direct the sequel, I don't know.
Yeah.
But basically, the events as told in the second story completely undermine anything you saw in the first one. Videotape gets digitally, or not even digitally, magically altered, so that what the people experience isn't what's shown on the cameras. So, because the first one was everything you saw on a camera, completely unreliable, just ignore it, we're working it this way.
Okay, well I like a part of that, because you want to surprise the viewers, and you want to keep giving them something new and interesting to think about, but you don't want to I guess if there's something that literally happens in the first movie and the viewers see it on camera, I saw this happen in the movie and that's what I saw. If the second movie completely says, well, what you thought you saw you didn't see,
it might not have been true at all.
Men in Black much, but anyways. But yeah, so there's certain things I would prefer if movies were you saw that, you know what happened, but then if you throw a few little changes in there, I think that's good too.
See, for me, it always smacked of the difference in storytelling. Like when we do a D&D game and we're bringing everything to the table for the first time, it shouldn't be no. It should be yes and. And. I've got this. Okay, let's take that and do this. Whereas the second director was basically saying, no, the first movie was completely unreliable. Focus on this.
Yeah. Because
this isn't being told just through cameras. You're seeing it as though you were an extra person there, and then the cameras get shown later. It's that's very much a negative storytelling, well, I guess meta storytelling for that.
Although, wasn't there a movie, it might have been The Ring or something like that, where the sequel is, because I didn't actually see this, but the sequel isn't actually a in-universe sequel. It's as if the people in our universe had watched the first movie and reacted to it, and then suddenly now there's hauntings from it?
Not The Ring, I think.
The Ring, okay.
Because I remember the second one, I actually felt really sorry for the evil girl in the first one. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
she really wanted to be reborn. Now, if you only could have talked some sense into her, she, probably could have had everybody work in a fairly copacetic way. Things could have been, I guess, as close to adequate as having like a demonic girl with horrible psychic powers as your daughter. But I'd still, heck, if given that opportunity, I'd still give it a try.
Give it a shot.
I'd still try and make things work, because, it's a family, and you've agreed to this. And most families don't get the chance to agree to this sort of thing before anybody is conceived. So, it's a nice, unique opportunity. So I remember that one. So it couldn't have been that one.
There was also a little bit of that in King Kong, I think, because one of the characters was a filmmaker in the Peter Jackson King Kong. One of the characters was filming stuff.
What I think you might be thinking of is the Night of the Living Dead versus Return of the Living Dead series.
Maybe.
The Return of the Living Dead, the first one from that one, they actually referenced the movie.
Oh yeah.
The Night of the Living Dead, and they said they explained it away as just like a way to cover up what actually happened. And then they explain the whole thing as being like a government conspiracy idea, which is kind of groovy in its own way.
Yeah.
And, it becomes like, okay, so what you saw maybe wasn't what really, really happened, but that's what everyone who sees it thinks, because that's what the government has told them. Ho, ho, ho.
Yeah, something like that. I'm trying to think if, like, Jay and Silent Bob referred to the other movies as... I don't think they did.
No, although there was an interesting amount of discongruity between how angry versus comedic Jay and Silent Bob were between those two.
Yeah. Like
Chasing Amy, their characters were referenced as being, characters in the comic book. Who the says, snoochie boochies or anything like that? Oh, he didn't actually say snoochie boochies. He said other words I'm not going to use. So,
Yeah.
But, so in some sense, there's a meta level on that. I do know in the Nightmare on Elm Street series, they did the new Nightmare one, in which case it was supposed to take place in the universe that makes the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. Because it actually does have, Wes Craven as Wes Craven, and Robert Englund as Robert Englund, in addition to also being Freddy Krueger.
Oh yeah, that's true. Reminds me of...
That's a very interesting way of telling it, because that way everything you saw does become the backstory for this movie. So the more of those movies you've seen, the more backstory you know. Congratulations. Even if it's only like previous stuff they've filmed. Which helps, absolve Freddy of some of the worst, like, aha, I'm a wisecracking villain sort of stuff he did. It's a nice character cleanse. Very interesting style, I must admit.
Did they do... when they went in Star Trek, when they went back in time to I think it was the late 90s, or no, it was the early 21st century.
With the whales in the fourth one.
No, this is the, 9 or 10, when they go back to the 21st century.
Oh, okay, where the first
Cochrane,
contact, yes.
First contact. And didn't, one of them say use the Force or something, one of the characters?
They may have.
I think she's
I don't recall that specifically.
Or call them a Jedi or something like that.
I do know they make occasional jokes like that between stuff. Aunt May once told Peter Parker, "You're not Superman,
Oh, I remember that one. Yeah.
Yeah. That was a nice little funny in joke. So those things are always kind of interesting, even if it does technically imply that for each universe, the other is the comic book, and so which is the real comic book and which is the real universe.
Yeah,
I would like it if they incorporated that into each other's universes as a thing. Although they decided in Marvel that the comics you read are actually what gets put out in the Marvel universe is like semi-propaganda, and they utilize the funds that you use from buying the comics to help repair all the buildings that get destroyed every week. So that's kind of groovy. And, it's admissible in court as evidence, apparently.
In the universe?
In the Marvel universe, the Marvel comic books can be admitted as evidence in a court of law.
Oh, I like that.
Or at least with the She-Hulk stuff. That gets a little weird with her sometimes, but she's a lot of fun.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised if there was some case somewhere in the real world in which a comic book has played a role. Well,
so that's the thing is the comic books are apparently based off the real life events that actually happen. Although, how much of that is actually supposed to be true versus we've got a deadline and this is all we can find from the news story right now. Make the comic book happen. So,
yeah.
But it's a weird little thing. It's It's something, at least, I'll say that. I don't know if they actually use that outside of the She-Hulk comics, though. So I don't know if that's technically canon or just her own little wacky sub-universe canon. You'll have to take that with a grain of salt, I suppose.
Yeah. You know what game doesn't have a backstory? Minecraft has no backstory. Well, I guess
I do like some of the theories people have placed for it, though. That's some good stuff.
Uh-huh.
Is the world has suffered a horrible apocalypse. And that it's like a zombie apocalypse. You run as far as you can away from civilization, and with just your bare hands, you must try to survive as the zombies come after you, and horrible genetically engineered, suicide creatures, and that's your backstory.
Yeah, that's true.
Or some people try and explain the zombies as previous Steves that have died. Like every time you die in the game, that's where one of the bodies from the zombie comes from. But no, there's no official backstory for what the heck's going on.
Yeah.
Which is okay. It's a heavy sandbox game. I don't suppose you always need backstory.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, you don't always. It's just, you're in the action, you're doing something, so that's enough.
So could you tell it like a deeply engaging D&D story without having any active backstory or campaign history?
Well, haven't we? I mean, I don't know if they're engaging, but we have in our gaming history, we've played games which have had zero history.
Well, it's usually just you show up at the dungeon and thus begins the series of adventures.
Yeah. I mean, it's engaging in a way because obviously we're there and we're rolling dice and we're having fun, so...
Nobody ever asks how this, ruined, settlement just happened to be there. What's its history? No, there's orcs, you loot them after you kill them, and then you go on to the next room until you're too tired to keep going.
Although, I've always, anytime I play, I've always been curious. I mean, sometimes it's like, no, for the sake of the game, I'm not going to bog us down in detail. But I've always been curious about, who made it and what's going on.
Really? Because I remember having this one really nice big dungeon with, random monsters going on and all that. Nobody ever asked the question, how are these monsters randomly coming into this area? What's going on with this place? And it's like, I had a nice backstory. I just never came up with the right way to implement it for the people to figure it out.
I guess it's who do the characters ask? If it depends on your character. If you make a wizard who likes to learn secrets and stuff, he might search around the dungeon for arcane clues. But
that's the thing is the rooms would stay in the same orientation, but they'd be different styled rooms every time you go in there. One place would be large block stone masonry, another time it'd be small brick. Third time it'd be rough hewn sort of cavern style, just in a nice, the same sort of shape. No one ever asked for that. They always thought it was weird. No one even bothered to figure out if they were on another plane of existence when they went through the doors to enter in this here.
Okay.
They just thought,
how would they go about that?
Well, they could start by, just checking to see if the laws of physics were the same, but no, they just marched right on in through because it was a series of doors you could move. You open up the doors, and on the other side, there's, the maze. And nobody bothered to ask, how does this happen? Is it just a pocket dimension, or is this a portal to another plane of reality? No one asked. No one asked. No one even thought to ask. They were too busy trying to loot creatures and kill that other guy's person if they could get away with it. There was some nice backstabbing there, and I was okay with that. That adds fun sometimes to a story. But nobody asked for the backstory, and how was I to implement it? That was always my biggest weakness, and that's what keeps getting me about it. I would like to try it again sometime. Just, an Undermountain style, a large dungeon design. But how to get the backstory in there?
Yeah, I guess one of the things you need is, characters like the old man telling the story. That's one thing.
I did have a concept for a potentially crazy person, just ranting and raving that's been stuck in there for so long.
Yeah.
But I always feared they'd mistake him for some sort of crazy person that worth experience. He must be a monster, just a crazy person. If you stay in here too long, you lose your mind. Blam, blam, blam. I waste him with my crossbow. Yeah. Now I loot him. What do you mean all he's got is some meat on him? That's it? Just some, stuff he's stolen for himself and a dagger? That's it?
Well, I guess you could put some kind of scroll, there's one way to do it, is put some kind of scroll on his body, and you find a scroll with some scrawlings, or maybe he's written on the wall or something like that. That's...
Yeah, but he's crazy, so he would have written on the wall in feces. Crazy person style,
Well, you could still read that.
Yes, but nobody wants to get close to read it.
I suppose. And there's your problem. There's why your characters don't learn your backstory.
I write with too much feces.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I guess, I mean, it would help if the characters had connections to the world. Like if they, if a character is a wizard or something, they must have gone. Well, I guess they don't have to go to wizarding school, but that's maybe
it
one
does
thing.
help if they have a proper tutor.
They've been to wizarding school, so then maybe their tutor told them something.
It's nothing. Nobody even tried to make a general knowledge check about it. Like, do I know anything about this place? Well, what knowledge skills do you have? Nothing by bardic lore. Okay, make your check anyways. Nobody even tried that. So that's always what got me, because I had this wonderful, nice story, and since then, I've actually managed to come up with several nice things that really flesh out what is effectively, yes, spoiler alert, it was another plane of existence entirely.
Yeah.
It was like a transitive plane, but instead of like being a weird endless staircase, no, it was a big maze. Because, D&D world, of course it's not going to be a maze.
Yeah.
It's just kind of how it works. It's a dungeon. So, I actually worked up some nice stuff, some like rituals, so if I ever want to incorporate the story again, it would be through a priest who follows a god who's like trapped in that place. He can get you to there for a limited time, but you're going to come back after a while. Mm-hmm. So the more you go in there, the more you explore the area and you come back, the more he can help explain to you like what you saw as it makes sense in a greater whole. And I think that would have worked out for a much better way of going about it.
Yeah, that probably would have. Hey, do you remember I had a demi-plane? Like, I had a campaign that I
remember that one. That was
demi-plane.
actually a great example of backstory telling.
Now, I think I put the backstory... Now, I don't know if I always agree with this, but I think I put the backstory or, like, explain the nature of the plane in a document that I had.
Well, you didn't have everything explained on that, as I recall. Because I remember that, especially because my character's backstory, he was a wizard, but he was like lost through time.
That's
so
right.
What became his backstory was like the very far underpinnings of what, how the demi-plane became the demi-plane as it's known. When he was around, it wasn't like this at all. It wasn't this green, lush, verdant landscape.
Yeah.
It was permanently dark. There was no sun. There was a lot of undead there, too, if I recall.
Yeah.
And so, like, as he learned, like, how it became what he knows is a horrible landscape where people are just trying to blast the unholy away to survive, became this wonderful land filled with this wild life. And just rich and green everywhere. And so as he learned the area in between, the backstory for your campaign unfolded.
Yeah.
So the Time Lost character was a very nice way of doing it that way. And it highlights another way of telling your backstory. Here's the very beginning, here's the current thing, and what we tell you is the little bits in between.
Yeah, that's a good way to do it. Yeah, just give that hint at the start.
And I think that was wonderfully told. Because, my character had the wife and child with them. Are they still alive? How did they survive? And that sort of thing became parts too. And definitely gave them motivation to research the history to find out, like, if my wife and child mentioned anywhere in the history, like how far back can I figure out for this?
Yeah, and unfortunately, as most campaigns, we never got far in that.
No, but he did find them in the end. They're in a time stasis area where nobody ages, and he found them and they reunited. Honestly, I consider that to be good enough closure for at least his story part. So, although the whole, adventure plan that you had never hit full fruition, my character finally had that piece where he reunites. At least that part of his story arc is completed.
Yeah, that's true.
So there's something to be said about that. And that might be something nice for another topic for another day. Personal character story arcs, when you should fulfill them, and how to keep a hook going for something else for them to keep going with.
Well, it's funny because as the storyteller or the dungeon master or whatever, you sort of get to play God and decide, is fate going to smile on this person today? Maybe not, or maybe yes, rather than just... as a person who reads stories, it's like you don't get to decide whether fate's going to smile or...
Unless you're doing those choose-your-own-adventure type stuff, in which case, no, I still have my hand held on this previous page. I get to go back and make the second choice.
Yeah.
There's that. But I think it would be a very nice thing to talk about, because I've seen very few times in a D&D type campaign where the character's backstory was even relevant, let alone changed and progressed. And the few times as a DM I've done that, the characters or the players very much were huge on that. Every time it involved their backstory, it's like, oh good, this is about me and my backstory. How is this progressing? They're in on it. And even if it's only touched every little once in a while, they keep coming back to the table. Like, we have the mutual friend, Les. He's not always the most punctual gamer. Sometimes he doesn't show up. He's got a life besides gaming every once a week.
Yep.
But the times I made sure to include his backstory in there, it became at least partially about his character. He showed up regularly. He still wants to play that character when we can get the chance. Whenever he's coming over here, make a mention about. We'll see if we can run it.
That's pretty good.
So yeah, there's a lot to be said about that, especially when it comes to the personal backstory. If you can tie that into the campaign you're working, I think that's a mark of a really good, or at least evolved dungeon master, or storyteller, however you want to term the phrase. And it keeps the people coming back to the table. So those of you out there who do run a campaign and you have the hard time getting the people to show up on time, try bringing their backstory in on it. Try bringing in their brother or twin or whatever it is mentioned. Make them an NPC in there.
And the thing is, you don't need much either from the players. Like, I've heard DMs complain about their players just not giving them kind of the details, but you hardly need anything. You just, the littlest detail that they give you, like, I have a brother or something like that. That little detail can spin off and you can run with it.
And here's the fun thing, is if the players who just, my fighter's name is Fighter, and that's all I have for a backstory. Those of them who see the other characters with a backstory get that involved in. They start thinking, wow, if I have a backstory, I can get it. It's like my turn in the spotlight. It can become about me. So my fighter's name is Fighter. He named himself that on purpose, and now he starts working on a backstory for his own. And then, congratulations, you've got a person a little bit more involved. You bring them in. You make sure that storyline gets put in there. And if you're good enough, you can weave it all together. One comprehensive storyline. You've got something people will remember for decades.
Yeah, true. And, well, you don't necessarily have to have equal time for. I mean, they
it
say,
is nice
course,
to have everybody have their time in the
time.
spotlight.
But you have to remember too that sometimes players, like I'm this way as a player, they enjoy, if it's a good story being told, they enjoy the other players' stories.
And that's what I like seeing too, because I'm a nice person myself. I like seeing other people have fun times as well. Yeah. I like seeing their stories get told and involved and progressed. And so, even though it's not my story, it's nice seeing the person I'm fighting, side by side with. I'm seeing part of their life, seeing them become like a real character and not just, this is my, puppet character and I, act for him and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
It's like, no, he's his own person now, his own thing. And that way, in the event of their death, you really do mourn it.
Yeah, sure. Like characters in a book, too, when they die.
Yeah. And because, let's face it, in low-level D&D, death is much more permanent than in a lot of novels.
Yeah.
So, something to consider.
High-level D&D death is less permanent, but...
I do have that one permanent magical item that does true resurrection at will. It'll take you 7 years of enchanting to make it. But once you do, unless you're going to die of old age, it's going to bring you back. Just provided you have somebody properly mentioning your name with hopefully a lock of your hair.
I wonder though, like if you could judge a successful D&D campaign as one in which the characters don't want to stay alive. Maybe not sadistic. That's the word.
Well, it could actually work as an interesting campaign thing if you have that more of a solid divide between the divine realms of the afterlife versus the mortal realms. That if they want to go and get the better answers, the more direct answers from the gods and their ancestors, however it's going to be, they do have to die. They can come back later because let's face it, the high end stuff is 10 years per level or hit die. So for like a 15th level character, they can stay dead for 150 years before being brought back. You might want to create a magic item that keeps their body from rotting, though.
Does that? I think there's some, or maybe you.
Yeah, gentle
like
repose is a first level spell. You can make like a. I think they have some old stuff in old AD&D about like crystal coffins that preserve the dead.
Yeah.
Basically a Cinderella or Snow White and Seven Dwarfs type situation. Right. Where, they put her in, and that's why she doesn't decay until the prince kisses her.
She wasn't
She wasn't truly dead, but she was fairly comatose.
Yeah. Okay.
So they put her in there to make sure she doesn't like start sweating or rotting.
A science fiction story?
There's some. That's the thing is there was effectively a stasis apple that was given.
Stasis apple.
Which is an interesting term in and of itself. You can start using as a way to avoid death and stuff. No, it was just a stasis apple. They didn't really die. So there's a trope term right there. But yeah, you could do that. And so the person dies. They drink hemlock or something or whatever. They die. Their body gets put into this preserving crystal coffin, and then they go to the land beyond the living. They get their answers, and then when I suppose they've got proper communion with the people on the living side, then they come back with the answers that no living person can ever really achieve. Which also helps cement them as more of an epic or mythic type character.
Yeah, there's a bit of stuff in some of the D&D material and related about how if you go to the plane of like Elysium is a good example of this, that you sort of forget.
You bliss out?
Yeah, you sort of...
I did some fun work with that with the other alignments, because if you look at the Great Wheel cosmology, the Elysium and I think it was Hades, had it was effectively an axis line on them. You go to Elysium and you bliss out and you don't remember your previous life, versus Hades, you hit that I don't care, like deep gray funk, and then you just kind of waste away that way. And so I was working that with some of the other alignments, whereas you go to like Mechanus and you start making plans for things, and you constantly find yourself never doing anything, but always planning for it, always planning. Versus you go to, that's what lawful neutral is for me.
Yeah, no, I like that. I like that idea a lot.
Whereas you go over to limbo, and it's all about doing stuff, but never planning ahead. So it's always the chaotic action. You're always doing stuff. You always got to do stuff. You're full of energy. You got to keep doing stuff. You never plan ahead, though. And so it's action without thought versus thought without action. Versus the neutral law versus chaos.
Pretty good.
And
I might have to steal that if I ever...
Well, that was the thing, is it really helped me think more about the planes that way. It's like, okay, so what is, lawful good versus, chaotic evil? And then I thinking about, like, the main differences between that. And I think I may still have the paper for it, but I came up with something for all the axes between the alignment charts.
Oh, yeah. Like every plane or just the main?
It'd be just the main ones, because they effectively work at somewhat in between the alignments. You've got, good, neutral, good, neutral, good, neutral.
Yeah, the realm of gnomes, which is...
I liked Bitopia.
Lawful and good.
Well, I liked Bitopia simply because at least it told the story as to what happens. What happens if you go up, up, up. Oh, hey, you hit another land.
Yeah.
They never explained what happens if you dig on those lands. Do you come up on the other side? Because that would have been awesome. An infinite realm that actually explains how it's infinite. Although if you dig far enough down, you don't always come up directly on the other side. And it's like random weird holes, and as the planar cosmology warps in ways you can't see because you're only three-dimensional.
Oh, yeah. Something like that.
Well, that's always my biggest problem with those outer planes. They're infinite! But, no, how does it infinite? What happens if you go up from, like, the first of the 9 hells? Can you go up for infinity? Because you said it's an infinite plane. What's up there? Are there flying demons, flying citadels, flying fortresses? I've only seen one mention of, like, Pazuzu as a demon god there, having his realm on like some sort of floating islands way up on the first, ring of, the 9 hells.
But yeah, the sky is theoretically infinite, so
exactly. And on most of the planes, the dirt should be infinitely deep too. So you get this weird situation for the plane of fire, where there's a lot of earth in this plane of fire, or solidified, fire earth or whatever they're calling it. They never really explained what it was more.
Well, I had a thought once in that, like, if each plane is truly infinite, then why couldn't it just be each one has its own galaxy?
Exactly. And why isn't there this whole, like pan-galactic fire empire going on?
Yeah. But, I mean, when you talk galactic distances, it's like, oh, yeah, well, we can get there in 1,000 years at light speed. You know?
Well, see, that's the thing is with an infinite, cosmology, is they have the thing for the elemental plane of air. Something happens nasty here. They send messengers off in like all whatever number of directions, I suppose it is.
Mm-hmm.
2 days travel to the next, leader, and they send off messengers off that way. So that way the entire plane can get notified. It's like, no, it's an infinite plane. It will take an infinite number of time before you get, even, oh, hey, wait, technically not anywhere near a percentage of the plane notified.
Yeah. So I guess, like, sort of the plane of air would be, like, it'd be a galaxy with stars and stuff.
The
and
Jules
planets.
Verne type situation going on again.
Oh, that'd be good. Yeah, that'd be okay.
Where there's air no
There's
matter
just
where you
air
go.
throughout the entire galaxy.
But again, as I said before, I would also like them to see less Earth chunks as to where you live. I'd like to see more solidified clouds.
Okay.
And work with cloud stuff. They do have a precedent for it. I mean, Jack and the Beanstalk, there were giants up in those clouds. So if the clouds are at least tough enough to support the weight of a giant, you should be able to have genies living up there.
Sure, why not? I think genies technically levitate.
Well, yeah, but they gotta have stuff, they got items too, and their items don't always levitate, so you gotta put them somewhere.
That's true.
It's a situation of why people need horses. It's like you can walk, but the horse is more efficient.
But do you remember, is there gravity in the plane of air? I guess it depends on which edition.
There is gravity, but it's the subjective style, so there's only gravity if you think there is, so you get people who accidentally kill themselves because they panic and don't realize there's no gravity.
Right.
So they look down, I'm falling, and then, because they think they are, and boom! They keep going until they hit the critical speed, and next thing you know, eventually they hit a patch of Earth, bam! Same as hitting the Earth in the regular world.
But say you have a desk and a computer in the middle of the elemental plane of air, and then you get up from your desk and you walk away to get some coffee. What happens to your desk?
It stays right there.
Okay.
So
it's not supported. Well, there might be a cloud around it then, maybe, or something like that.
Well, see, no, the thing is it's just right there. But if you push it away from you, it'll keep going in that direction until you catch up to it and think, yourself to slow and stop it.
Oh, you think so? But
I believe that's how
air
it works with the
resistance
subjective.
slow it down?
Not from what I've heard. Is they got mentions like in places like the astral plane of arrows floating forever through the subjective non-gravity. Because someone fired an arrow and they missed, and now that arrow goes forever. Well, this is the same problem they have with like phasers in Star Trek. Like you miss with your phaser, in a gunship
right
in
through
space,
the planet,
and it'll just go forever through space. Apparently, there's all sorts of these like random phaser fire throughout the rest of the Alpha Quadrant as people miss during shots.
Yeah,
it just goes forever.
Well, Earth's own orbit, like in the real world, is littered with space debris. Like
we are a dirty species.
A wrench could hit an astronaut and kill him, right?
Yeah, they have some nice. They do have some nice plans at cleaning that up, though. They got some nice. Sort of like cleaner, they're effectively space Roombas that'll go out and clean the area part of the orbit out as they go about, fairly low end because solar maintenance panels and all that. And so they stay powered, so it's not a drain on your resources. And enough of them should be able to clean up the geosynchronous orbits and all that stuff in a decent amount of time.
Well, I hope so. Hope by the time
they need somebody to implement that though, and that's like who's going to pay to clean this up? It's not like you have like a parks commission. Like you have somebody to clean up the parklands when you go out camping. Although you shouldn't dirty it up. That's rude.
Leave only footprints.
Take only photos.
Yeah.
But they do have the people to clean up for that, but there's nobody for space. Like, you could have the UN tax everybody on Earth to clean up the space debris they left behind. At least the spacefaring nations. It's one way to go about it, but nobody can enforce that. The UN's fairly toothless in that regard, so
Yeah, I think so. Somebody will have to come up with something, some solution.
Oh, they'll probably just have a Kickstarter for it.
Yeah, that could work.
Legitimately, one of the best ways of doing it these days.
Yeah, I don't see why not.
Well, they Kickstarted something like get that cube into space, right? They launched their own like cuboidal satellite system.
Oh yeah. Oh.
I think they got it. I don't know if they managed to get enough funding. I hope they got enough funding for it.
We'll have to look that up.
Yeah.
So we've been going for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Let me see. Shall we wrap it up?
Yeah. There's I suppose an infinite number of good ways to tell the backstory, but you really have to think ahead before you can tell what happened. You can't just start off and just hope you can wedge it in there. it's very much an art. You got to trickle it out little piece by piece, or heck, for those who do like the backstory being told in one chunk, write it up, in like a little couple-page booklet form, and then whoever finds the book that tells the backstory, well, congratulations, you get this extra handout sheet. There you go. What a nice way of going about it for those who are okay with it.
All right, then.
So, yeah.
I want to remind everyone we can be reached at thesimulationist@gmail.com and at some various social networks, including Facebook, YouTube. Yeah.
But once again, be careful about YouTube comments. They are notoriously ill-regarded. Not that we think that bad about you. Just be careful, who you're posting next to, and you don't want to be seen like the guy who thinks the intelligent question, and then they read further down, and oh hey, there's a spammer next to them.
Well, I think we've tried to keep the comments clean on it. There hasn't been a lot of comments on our YouTube channel.
Yeah.
So it's right now it's fairly easy to manage. So if there's anything nasty, I can just get rid of that. You probably never will see it.
Okay.
But that's probably about it. I've been Josh Trelevin.
I've been Ryan Kirkby.
Send us money.